Hey everyone, Warwick's here. Welcome back, class. It's Brewmaster 102, Talent Trees. Now, for those of you that are maybe clicking on this video wondering what the hell is going on, I've been doing a full Brewmaster Academy series. I'll be doing one for Mistweaver and Windwalker Monk as well, in a larger series that I'm calling Monk Academy for the War Within. In these videos, we're going very deep into these talents. We're talking about almost everything in the tree and talking about like what talents are good, what talents are bad in this video. The previous video I did, we went over the spells and abilities, where hopefully if you've never played Monk or you're new to Brewmaster Monk, hopefully you kind of figured out, learned some abilities that are important, what are considered core, what are considered rotational, what are considered niche, what are considered cooldown, things of that nature. In this video, we're going to dive deeper into the talent trees, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit about these in terms of a talent build setup. Obviously, as you can see, we are still at level 70. I record this on really the first day we get to play the pre-patch, so we're not going to go into hero talent builds just yet. That said, I am going to be doing quick guides at level 80 before the raid drops that will actually touch on hero talents in more detail. So be on the lookout for those. They're going to be dropping sometime in very late August or early September before we get into our first wonderful raid of the War Within. Now, quick disclaimers about this video. These videos are designed and intended for beginners to the spec. If you've never played Monk or you've never tried Brewmaster before, but you've played maybe in other specs, I hope these videos are helpful because it hopefully helps you understand why these talent builds are good, why these talent builds are not necessarily, or why these talents are good, why these talents are bad, why these talents are mandatory, why they're considered flavor picks, things of that nature. So let's dive in right into this class. We are back in session. And let's talk about the class tree first. So up at the top of the first row, we get Soothing Mist, Paralysis, and Rising Sun Kick. Now, Brewmaster by default gets Paralysis and Rising Sun Kick. Mistweaver, of course, gets Soothing Mist. Now, Soothing Mist, you're never really going to take because you're never going to really need to sit down and channel a heal into another player or even yourself. So this is a talent for Brewmaster Monk you skip entirely. Paralysis is a single target CC, very kind of universally useful, particularly in dungeon and leveling scenarios, and does have talent builds down here that will remove like enrage effects. Rising Sun Kick, a very powerful single target ability. All three specs of Monk like Rising Sun Kick, which is why it's here in the class tree. So you get these two by default. You can't not get them, so you have them. Alright, Elusive Mist. This reduces all damage taken while you're channeling your Soothing Mist by 6%. Again, for Brewmaster Monk purposes, useless. Don't take this talent. It's not going to have a lot of effect for you. Tiger's Lust. I covered Tiger's Lust in the spells and abilities video, so we're not going to go too deep on it, but basically it's a very good speed boost for yourself or your party. Has remove roots and snares from you, so some really good effective root break for you. If there's a mechanic that has a root break, Tendrils Roots, for example, this breaks it. Very good ability to have. I would say it's mandatory because you need points to get down the tree. This is one of the best points that you can invest in. We get our first Chorsenoid, which is Disable, which basically slows them by 15% by 15 seconds, and your melee attacks will constantly refresh this debuff. This is a PvP talent, some very niche uses in Mythic Plus situations, never useful in Raid. So this talent tree, if you're not doing PvP, you can safely skip. Crashing Momentum targets that you roll through a snare for 40% for 5 seconds. Potentially some niche usefulness, but for the purposes of should you really take it, I don't think this is a choice node or talent tree. As you can see, I've skipped it in this just quick build that I put together. I skipped this talent tree because I just don't see where either of these abilities are going to be extremely useful. Fast Feet. Rising Sun Kick deals 70% increased damage, and Spinning Crane Kick deals 10% increased damage. This is just a straight up damage increase. Mandatory pick. Take it. Grace of the Crane increases all healing taken by 4%. This affects your healing through Spirit of the Ox and Expel Harm and Vivify, as well as healing done by others onto you. So this helps out your healers, this helps out you. Very easy pick. You're a tank, you're always taking damage. More healing onto you makes your life easier, makes your mana bars for your healers much easier. Mandatory pick for Brewmaster Monk. Take it all the time. Bounding Agility. Roll and Chi Torpedo, travel a small distance further. So you get a little bit of extra distance on your roll. This is a pretty good talent, I think. It's very high in the tree, so you can have places where you can skip it. But again, you need points to be able to get down to these gates in the tree. So I'm going to say that you take it, because right around these trees are broken down into 3 sections. There's the top section, which goes through here. There's a middle section, which goes through here. And then there's a bottom section, which is these final rows down here. and you have to get a certain amount of points before you can move down into the tree. So to get from tier 1 to tier 2, you need 8 points. To get from tier 2 to tier 3, you need a total of 20 points. So some abilities that may not necessarily be like mandatory must picks because they're powerful are going to be mandatory must picks because they're the best of what options you have. I think Bounding Agility falls into the latter category. It's very good, increases your mobility a little bit, pretty useful. Calming Presence reduces all damage taken by 3%. You're a tank, you're taking damage all the time. Anything that you can do to reduce your damage taken is a good thing. Mandatory pick. Wind's Reach, disable increased and duration of crashing momentum increased. Because you're taking the talent, you're skipping the talent, the choice node talent, you're obviously not taking this. Detox, this removes poisons and disease from your target. In raid situations, you can probably skip this unless there's a fight that has a lot of them, thinking of Council of Ursoc and Emirdrasil, for example. Mythic Plus, this is a very useful ability to have, so kind of depends on the content of whether or not this is going to be a mandatory pick. I took it in the raid build just simply because what else is there to grab? I made you switch it out for like improved touch of death. All right, next row down, Vivacious Vivification. Basically, this makes it so that every 10 seconds you get an instant Vivify that does 20% more healing, and then also reduces the energy cost of Vivify by 75%. You're not hitting a ton of Vivifies in most situations as a Brewmaster Monk, so this talent loses a lot of value for Brewmaster. Not for Mistweaver, obviously, sounds pretty good. We'll talk about Mistweaver later, but for Brewmaster, you can skip this talent. It's not really going to have a ton of use. Jade Walk, while out of combat, your movement speed is increased by 15%. I would love for this to be useful in active combat scenarios. Unfortunately, it is not. There's a really good leveling talent, like really, really good leveling talent while you're traveling between packs. Mythic Plus scenarios, there are some situations where if there's a dungeon that has a lot of long downtime and you can't mount, then this talent starts to see a lot more value. But I think outside of those very specific scenarios, you can skip this talent safely. Pressure Points. Paralysis now removes all enrage effects from the target. In Mythic Plus, if there's a lot of enrage effects in a dungeon, this is a very, very important talent. In raid situations, you can safely skip it. So again, depending on the content you're doing, this might be a mandatory pick. It might be a skippable pick. Spearhead Strike. We talked about it. It's an interrupt. You need the points to get down into the tree. So because right now you're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you need this in order to get down the tree. And then Ancient Arch reduces the cooldown of paralysis by 15 seconds and the cooldown of leg sweep by 10 seconds. Generally speaking, this is just a good pick to, again, flesh out your tree. Now, there are going to be builds where you could potentially, in raid particular, you could remove this and grab like Ancient Vivification. Let me take a point out of here to grab Vivacious Vivification and you just track the instant Vivify. I just don't think that's worth it. So it's just safe to put 2 points in here. Next row down, we get another choice node, Chi Burst. Now, I didn't talk about Chi Burst in the spells and abilities video because I wanted to talk about it here. This is going to heal. Basically, what it does is that you channel under a second, so it's even faster than your global cooldown. You basically will pour a torrent of Chi 40 yards forward, deal damage to enemies, heal enemies that are in its path. And then with a 40-yard thing, you can use it sometimes to act as a tool to pull enemies towards you. Like you want to aggro them from far away, you can use Chi Burst to do that. For a long time, you didn't use Chi Burst because it just wasn't powerful enough, and Chi Wave was very good. But now Chi Burst got a massive damage buff, so it is very much worth using now. I will say that for Brewmaster Monk, you can grab this, but if you're worried about having too many buttons, you can choose again the Chi Wave option, which is a passive one. It is not going to be as much damage as Chi Burst is, but it does remove a button off your keybinds, one less thing for you to have to think about casting. Basically, when you Rising Sun Kick or Vivify, you do this wave of Chi that bounces off enemies. So very passive option. Basically, use Rising Sun Kick on cooldown, and you're going to have this up quite a bit and have this rolling. Again, I don't think it's going to be as much damage as Chi Burst, but it is an option if you're worried about button blow. Transcendence. We talked about Transcendence in the last video. This is actually a 2-button thing with your ability to trade it out. Very good for mobility. I talked a little bit about it in the last video, so go check that out if you're interested. I also have a whole series of videos on the Season 4 Dragonflight dungeons about how you can effectively use Transcendence. So go check that video out if you want to. Energy Transfer. Successfully interrupting an enemy reduces the cooldown of paralysis and roll by 5 seconds. This is a niche pick because you have 3 charges of roll. You don't really lack for having a roll charge up all the time. And paralysis, if you are needing a 5-second quicker paralysis, that means there's a lot of enrage effects in a dungeon, and that's where you'd be using pressure points. So potentially some value, but I don't see it having a ton of it long term compared to other talents that you can pick. So I would say you probably could safely skip this one with some very specific scenarios where it is good. Is our next choice node. We have an active ability of Chi Torpedo, which replaces Roll, which basically moves you forward a very long distance and then gives you a movement speed bonus for 10 seconds afterwards and stacking up to 2 times. Also has a maximum amount of charges. Chi Torpedo definitely goes much further than Roll for sure. Chi Torpedo usually very good if you're having to cover long distances. I actually used Chi Torpedo on Farrak when I was a Mistweaver because I was healing the ads, and so to be able to cover the ground on that platform very quickly was quite nice to have. Outside of that though, Chi Torpedo can be useful, can be dangerous because you can just Chi Torpedo off cliffs. I have definitely done that way more than I care to admit. Hell, I've rolled off of cliffs, let's be real. It goes up against Celerity, which basically reduces the cooldown of Roll and gives you another maximum charge of Roll. I think this is just always a safe pick. Anytime you can get more mobility, which does give you with the CDR, and you get an extra charge, that is a ton of mobility added to your kit. Very, very good to have. Again, Chi Torpedo, if you love it, take it, but if you're not like absolutely a 100% Chi Torpedo lover, take Celerity. All right. Next choice node is going to be Quick Footed, which basically reduces snare effects on you by 20%, versus Hasty Provocation, which makes targets that you've taunted move faster towards you. I think both of these are very safely skippable for Brewmaster. You will see some people using Quick Footed. If there's a lot of snares in a dungeon, there's points that you can move around to grab this, but I think that's a niche pick. Hasty Provocation, I would just love it for to be baseline into Brewmaster Taunt. I would love for that. But this is not the world we are in, sadly. Ferocity of Juen increases all damage dealt by 2%. Mandatory pick. I don't think I need to explain why. Next choice node, Ring of Peace, which I've talked about in the previous videos, versus Song of Chi-Ji, which basically is a thing that disorients targets for 20 seconds, but as soon as you deal damage to them, they are no longer disoriented. Because of that, it has less overall value than Ring of Peace does. But I've seen some people who effectively use Song of Chi-Ji. I'm just not a person that thinks it's really all that great. And I'll be going back to, and I would just recommend Ring of Peace in almost all situations. Spirit Essence. Transcendence transfers snares targets within 10 yards by 70% for 4 seconds when cast. I would love for this to be good. I just don't see a world in where it is. That's really all I have to say about it. Tiger Tail Sweep increases the range of leg sweep by 4 yards, so you get even more range on your leg sweep, which is a baseline ability that you get. That's useful in Mythic Plus situations. It's useful in raid situations. In raid builds, though, you do take this because it's the only way to get down to this node because you're not necessarily taking Improved Touch of Death. Now, Improved Touch of Death is very good in Mythic Plus, where you can use it on targets less than 50% of health, regardless of their HP pool. Touch of Death baseline, if you recall, only goes when you are below your health pool. But here you can actually use it as like an execute button when you combine it with Fatal Touch. Actually, I'm going to do this. Move that there. When you combine it with Fatal Touch, which we'll talk about later, it does allow you to get, that extra bit of DPS in. Vigorous Expulsion. Expel Harm's critical strike chance is increased by 15% and its healing increased by 5%. This does impact your Spirit of the Ox Orbs. Need I say more? It's very, very good for Brewmaster Monk. You use Expel Harm all the time. Take it. We have a choice node here. Diffuse Magic, which I talked about in Spells and Abilities field, is technically a choice node with Yu'lon's Grace, which basically gives you a Magic Absorb Shield for 2% of your max health every 2 seconds. This is getting nerfed eventually when they implement those changes to where it is 1% of your maximum health every 3 seconds. So this is becoming significantly weaker once they implement all those tank changes, which means right now, Diffuse Magic is just good in all situations. Peace and Prosperity, a new talent to this tree. Reduces the cooldown of Ring of Peace, and Sling of Chi-Ji's cast time is reduced by half a second. Just good. It's a filler. It's a way to fill points down here in the bottom of the tree. As you can see, if I remove it, you've got to take something else in this tree. So there's ways to skip it. You could grab something like Vivacious Vivification. You could grab Jade Walk instead of this. This is just a very safe talent. In Mythic Plus dungeons, this is a very good talent. Fortifying Brew. This is where you get your main cooldown. I talked about this in the Spells and Abilities video, so we're not going to touch too much on it. Dampen Harm shares a cooldown, or shares a choice node with Dance of the Wind. Dance of the Wind also getting nerfed here. I don't know if it already is nerfed, but the tooltip here is at least incorrect. Dodge chance on this is now 5% versus 10%, so again, becoming significantly weaker. There's still a chance that it could be very good if there's not anything Dampen Harm really can counteract effectively. So this is going to be a thing that's going to be either raid dependent, even down to being dungeon dependent. So definitely take a look at that. Save them all. Whenever your healing spells heal an ally whose health is below 35%, you gain additional 10% healing for the next 4 seconds. I don't really see a lot of value in this for Brewmaster Monk. This technically does proc off of your expel harm when you heal yourself, and if you're low health, this can proc save them all. I just don't like the gameplay loop that brings on, so I'm going to say skip in all situations. Swift Art. Roll removes a snare effect once every 30 seconds. You have Tiger's Lust up every 30 seconds, so this loses a lot of value unless you're constantly being snared. It's probably good for PvP, where something like a Frost Mage, Curse of Exhaustion being put on you, things like that could definitely have some impact, but for PvE situations, which is what I focus on, nah. Alright, Profound Rebuttal gives you crit healing increased by 50%, or Strength of Spirit heals you based on your missing health. Strength and Spirit is excellent. You should take this. This is, to me, a mandatory pick in this tree. So, I would always take this because it basically makes Expel Harm with 5 Gift of the Ox Orbs, potentially just a lay on hands. I've healed so much from having Strength of Spirit with 5 Ox Orbs when I'm at low health. It is insane what it can do for you. I definitely recommend it. Summon Black Ox Statue. So all the statues kind of got reworked to where they're all more spec specific rather than class specific. Black Ox is the Brewmaster one, which basically throws it down on the ground, pulses threat to enemies, and you can provoke the statue in order to have an AoE taunt. Very niche use situation here. I don't really see, there might be some pulls in Mythic Plus that you would need to do in order to, that need Black Ox in order to make it work. But if you're doing that type of pull work, you're not watching this video. So I would say Black Ox Statue for you beginners and your like early intermediate type Brewmaster monks that are hopefully getting a lot of value out of this. Skip this, you don't really need it. Here we get a choice note, Expeditious Fortification, which reduces the cooldown by 120 seconds. This is also not yet fully implemented correctly. It's actually getting reduced to 30 seconds. Iron Shell Brew gives you 10% an additional 10% health, an additional 10% DR. So it goes from 20% to 30%. That's where you get that 30% DR on this, is from Iron Shell Brew. Very good. I'm going to recommend you take this in all situations. Chi Proficiency. Magic damage increased by 4%, healing increased by 4%. This affects things like Breath of Fire, because Breath of Fire is fire damage. It expects Exploding Keg, because Exploding Keg is fire damage. Charred Passions, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is fire damage on your Spinning Crane Kick and your Blackout Kick. That is all considered magic. Chi Proficiency buffs all of that. Very, very good ability to have for Brewmaster monks. Healing Winds. Transcendence Transfer instantly heals you for 15% of your maximum HP. Good talent, probably some good use cases for it. I don't think it's going to be generally acceptable, so if you find a good use for it, talent it. If not, you can safely skip it. You're not losing much. Windwalking. You and your allies have, within 10 yards, have 4% increased movement speed, but this does stack with other effects. This is very much a flexible point. Like, I take this talent because there's not really anything else in the bottom part of this tree that I want. But, like, if Healing Winds becomes good, or if one of these choice nodes becomes good, or if I want to grab Clash, or whatever the case may be, this is the point that I would pull, because this is the weakest of all these talent trees here at the bottom. So this is what I call the flex point. You put it here because it's just generally a safe pick, because it's always useful, always on, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to take it. Bounce Back. When a hit deals more than 12% of your maximum health, reduce all damage you take by 20% for 4 seconds. Cannot occur more than once in every 30 seconds. You're taking damage all the time. You take big hits a lot. This is a good way for you to prevent from just getting absolutely clapped, because you take a big hit, then you get 20% DR for 4 seconds, which allows you to react to it. Very, very good talent. Mandatory pick for Brewmaster Monk. Martial Instincts. Increases physical damage done by 4% and avoidance increased by 4%. You deal a lot of physical damage. Keg Smash, physical damage. Blackout Kick, physical damage. Res and Sun Kick, physical damage. You see a pattern here. Avoidance, basically what avoidance does, it's what's called a tertiary stat that actually makes it so that you just get a chance to just reduce the damage you take by 4% on AoE abilities. So if there's a swirly on the ground, you'll take 4% less damage from it. Really good ability, mandatory pick for Brewmaster. Alright, Lighter Than Air. Roll causes you to become lighter than air, allowing you to double jump to dash forward a short distance within 5 seconds, but the cooldown on roll is increased by 2 seconds. This is where something like celerity comes into play. It balances that out. So let me show you how this works. So we're going to roll, jump, as you can see there. So roll, jump, and then dash. So this allows you to cover a lot of ground. So I would say this is really just a flavor pick. This is one that you can pick if you want. I don't think it's mandatory, but if you really like the playstyle, which I do, then grab it. Low of Chi, you gain basically a bonus effect based on your health. You gain movement speed above 90%, damage reduction between 90 and 35, extra healing when you're below 35% health. In raid situations, this will be very good because a lot of the times you're going to be between that 90 and 35% health threshold, so just a free extra 5% DR, pretty good. Mythic Plus situations, you could probably still find a way to take it. I think it's a pretty decent talent. I don't think it's mandatory. Pick it if you like it. Alright, we get Escape from Reality. Basically, when you Transcendence, you can Transcendence a second time. So if you need to Transcendence out of a mechanic, and then you want to get back onto the boss quickly, you can Transcendence back into the mechanic, into where the boss was standing or a mob was standing within that 10 seconds. Increases your mobility. It's fun. It's got some cool flavor. It's got some really fun use cases, but I wouldn't consider it mandatory. Transcendence links spirits. Basically, this now tethers you to an ally, much like the Ancient Wernstone for Augmentation Evoker works. This does the same thing. So if you have a very specific place that you need to stand, and you have like a healer that's going there, you can then Transcendence your healer instead of Transcendencing your spirit. Again, very niche use cases. I'm sure there's going to be people that find some really good places to use this, but I wouldn't consider it mandatory. Fatal Touch. Touch of Death increases your damage by 5% for 30 seconds after being cast, and gives it a 90-second cooldown. In boss situations, along with improved Touch of Death, this is very valuable because you're getting a 30-second window where you deal 5% more damage. Never a bad thing. And Touch of Death is usable at 15% or below. So it's that last stretch of the fight where maybe people are bleeding out. Any extra damage that you can get in that last 15% of a boss's health, always going to be good. I think it's a mandatory pick for Brewmaster Monk. And finally, we get Rushing Reflexes. Basically, when you roll near enemies, you just bloop right onto them. This potentially could be very good. It could be potentially very troll. It kind of depends. You're going to have to play with it and find out if you really like it or not. I don't think it's mandatory. I think it's a flavor pick. Pick it if you like it. And then Clash. Clash is an ability that basically makes you and a target charge each other, meeting them halfway, and then you root all the targets that are within 6 yards of that target for 4 seconds. Clash is very, very, very finicky. Some mobs, you cannot move them. So therefore, this doesn't work. So you basically charge someone, and where you're supposed to meet them halfway, they haven't moved, and you're still like 10 yards away. It is incredibly stupid. I don't like Clash. I've never liked Clash. I think you can skip it. So that's the talent tree build. This is a Mythic Plus setup that I have. I think this is a pretty safe build that you can do for Mythic Plus, or for Raid rather, and then for Mythic Plus, a couple of talent points change around. I skip Improved Touch of Death here because generally speaking, you're only going to use it to kill mobs, but you can easily replace it with like Jade Walk. You can grab pressure points here. I think would be good. Like there's some good talents that you can bounce around. If Detox is not a viable and important part of the dungeon, you can come grab something else in the tree. Like there's a lot of flex points in this. I'll go over more specific talent build options in the quick guides that I do at level 80. All right, let's go over to the class tree. So the class tree, there are mandatory picks. Keg Smash, we've talked about it. I can't emphasize enough. This is the most important button you push. You need Purifying Brew, you have to take Shuffle. These are the 3 mandatory points. On the third row, Staggering Strikes. When you blackout kick, you get a small reduction in your stagger. This number has never been tuned to make it worth it. This has to be like 132,000 stagger in order for it to be worth it. It's not a very good talent. I would avoid this at all cost. Gift of the Ox. This is the healing spheres that we've talked about. This is a mandatory pick. Take it. It's a big part of your sustain. Spirit of the Ox also does healing spheres. So you get Gift of the Ox and Spirit of the Ox. Basically, this makes it so that you have a consistent flow of healing spheres that you can go in and suck up. These 2 talent points, very much mandatory. Quick Sip. You gain Shuffle every time you purify Stagger, basically. Optional talent. There are some builds that might take it, but I don't think it's something that you necessarily need to go chase. Hit scheme. When you deal damage with Blackout Kick, it makes your damage of your Keg Smash more, stacking up to 4 times. You Keg Smash a lot, so you're never really going to get the 4 stacks on this, but anytime you can make Keg Smash hit harder, that's a good thing. Mandatory pick. Elixir of Determination. This is a new talent that came in with the War Within beta. When you fall below 40% of health, you gain an absorbed shield for, again, these numbers are going to get changed. It's going to be 8% of your recently, it's going to be up to 20, I think it's 20% of your recently purified damage, or a minimum of 8% of your maximum health. This tooltip is incorrect. These changes, I don't know if they were updated, but these are changes that are happening to Elixir of Determination. This makes it like this was a talent that was like capstone worthy, that was in the 4th row. So the changes I think were probably going to happen either way. This is a very good thing. Brewmaster Monk relies a lot on absorb shields to help mitigate damage outside of stagger and purify. So absorb shields are going to be a big part of the Brewmaster playstyle moving forward. This is another way to get one. Very, very good talent. We have a choice note here. Rushing Jade Wind. I talked about this spells and ability video. I'm a RJW lover. I love Rushing Jade Wind. It's one of my favorite abilities. It's visually cool in a spec that doesn't necessarily have the greatest visuals, but it does share a choice note with special delivery. Well, basically, when you drink a brew, you basically throw a keg into the air that falls after 3 seconds. You can troll yourself. You can move mobs out of this. It is you have to be very mindful of it. This choice note is entirely based on what does more damage. If special delivery does more damage, you take special delivery. If Rushing Jade Wind is doing more damage, you take Rushing Jade Wind. Okay. Celestial Flames. This talent has never really been tuned well enough to do much. It's kind of a talent that has never really been good. That 30% chance is really low. The 6-second duration is really low. It's just not a very good talent. Celestial Brew, we talked about it. It's a main core defensive ability. Take it. August Blessing. This is a passive ability. When you basically would get overheal, you instead get an amount converted into an extra hot over time. So this just adds a little bit of extra healing to your kit. It's either this or One with the Wind. Both of these talents are kind of but you need one in order to be able to move down the tree and get you your point. So this is the one I think you should take. But you can grab One with the Wind, which basically means that your Elusive Brawler stack doesn't reset when you dodge. I think both of these are kind of whatever. You can pick whichever one you want, and it's going to be what you need to open up further down the tree. All right, Zen Meditation. We've talked about Zen Meditation already, so we don't need to go into it. Good defensive cooldown. Not going to be super prevalent in use, but if you use it right, it's a very powerful defensive. Strike at Dawn. Rising Sun Kick grants a stack of Elusive Brawler, so you now have a bunch of different ways. Blackout Kick, Rising Sun Kick, both give Elusive Brawler. These are abilities that you use often, so you're always going to have, not always, but you're going to have a very high uptime on your Elusive Brawler dodge stacks. Very good defensive ability. Makes Rising Sun Kick do something other than just a truckload of damage. Gives you some defensive benefit when you use it. Excellent talent. Breath of Fire, we've talked about. Mandatory pick, take it. Gaiplin's Imperial Brew. Purifying Brew heals you for 25% of the purified stagger damage. So you purify 50%, and then you heal for 25% of that 50%. So it's a much smaller number in reality, but still a very, very powerful ability. Mandatory pick for Brewmaster Monk. Grab this. Invoke Nijao, the Black Ox. This is our Celestial that Brewmaster Monk has. As you can see, I'm not taking it. That's because Invoke Nijao hasn't been good. It doesn't do enough damage. And, it does help with some stagger transfer, but the defensive benefit out of that has not been very good over the last couple of patches. So you're seeing a lot of people that just don't take Nijao. I'm not going to be taking it. I'm playing a no Ox build, as I call this. But if you really like Nijao, you can take it. Like, you're not going to lose a ton of defensive value or DPS value grabbing this. I don't think it's the best pick, but if you really love it, you could probably safely take it. I don't recommend it, though. Tranquil Spirit. When you consume a healing sphere or cast Expel Harm, your current stagger load amount is by 5%. So another way to reduce your stagger on a consistent basis. Good talent. Grab it. Shadowboxing Dregs. Blackout damage is increased by 20%. Strikes 2 additional targets versus an additional 1 second cooldown. So it takes them from 4 to 3 with a 10% increased damage. Fluidity of motion has never been good compared to Shadowboxing Dregs. Shadowboxing Dregs, 20% damage on Blackout Kick is just good. Very, very good. Take it. All right. So Beam Strength. When you use Keg Smash, you instantly reset Breath of Fire. So this is going to make sure that you always have a Keg Smash Breath of Fire combo every time that you use Keg Smash. Very good talent. I would highly recommend that you take this, because Scalding Brew basically makes Keg Smash deal more damage. So your first Keg Smash is not going to be affected by this, but then your second and third and every Keg Smash beyond that mostly, is going to be affected by this. So it's a good talent, but because you don't get Breath of Fire on 100% uptime, because it's a 12-second duration with a 15-second cooldown, this talent loses a lot of value. It takes the Solid Beam Strength. Fort Brew Determination basically makes Stagger more effective while it's active. This is just not as good as you think it is. Attaching it to a long cooldown, I don't see it, and I hate build a cooldown stuff. Bear has that. It's awful. Choice Node, Bob and Weave, basically increases stagger duration by 3 seconds, so it makes it a 13-second dot versus a 10-second dot. Versus Dragonfire Brew, which is an active ability, which basically resets your Celestial Brew cooldown, resets your Purifying Brew cooldowns, and gives you full energy. There are some gameplay elements for advanced users where this is actually really, really effective, but for beginners and intermediates, I don't recommend this talent. Take Bob and Weave. Walk with the Ox, basically when you get Shuffle, you gain cooldown reduction on your 3-minute cooldown of Nijao. If you're not taking Nijao, don't take this talent. Useless. We get Light Brewing, reduces the cooldown of Purifying and Celestial Brew by 20%. What I would say is, this is if you are wanting to be very safe, you can take this talent, because any reduction on your brews makes it so that you have more defensive stability. So this is a good talent. You can pick this. A lot of monks, though, are going to take Training of Nijao, which basically gives you even more mastery, which means even more attack power. So this is a little bit more of an offensive ability versus this being almost purely defensive. This is actually a great choice, though, because you can kind of use it to determine what your playstyle is. If you want to be very safe, take Light Brewing. If you want to be a little more aggressive in your playstyle, take Training of Nijao. Great choice zone. Pick either one. You're good doing either. Pretense of Instability. Activating your main 2 brews gets you 15% dodge for 5 seconds. Excellent. Very good at Mythic Plus. Slightly less value at Raid depending on the fight, but still very, very good. Very good talent. Grab it. Counter Strike. Each time you dodge an enemy or an enemy misses you, your next Tiger Palm or Spinning Crane Kick deals increased damage. You're getting a lot of dodge through Elusive Brawler. You get a lot of baseline dodge if you get Dance of the Wind. You're getting 5% extra dodge. You're getting dodge through Elusive Brawler. Like, you're dodging a lot. Counter Strike's a good talent. Charred Passions. Basically, when you cast Breath of Fire, you ignite your leg. Also Inflame, making so the Blackout Kick and Spinning Crane Kick do their physical damage plus 50% additional damage as fire damage, and it refreshes the duration of your Breath of Fire on a target. That's where something like Scalding Brew plus Charred Passions can play well together, but it's very finicky, requires you to track a lot, so I don't recommend it. That said, Dragonfire Brew does have some really good use in raid situations because you're less worried about your Breath of Fire uptime because you're not always tanking. So the DR that you get from having Breath of Fire up, not always as important. So Dragonfire Brew does have some use in raid, but I think in Mythic Plus situations, you always take Charred Passions. All right. High Tolerance. Basically, this makes it so that you delay stagger a little bit better, and then you gain a little bit of haste based on your current level of stagger. This talent used to be way better than what it was. It's been nerfed really hard. A point in it is fine, but I would say this is very much a flex point. You can take something like Chi Surge, Call to Arms, Heightened Guard, go grab one with the wind, Facepalm in a single target situation, a second point in Anvil and Stave, which we'll talk about. But this is a safe pick. So if you're looking again for that safety as a beginner, good pick here. Exploding Keg, we talked about Exploding Keg and then spells and abilities level. Excellent talent, mandatory, grab it. Improved Nijao, this basically means that Purifying Brew makes the damage of your next stomp better based on how much stagger you purify. Again, if you're not taking Nijao, you're not taking this. Elusive Footwork, Blackout Kick deals an additional 5% damage, so we're getting 20% from Blackout Treads, we're getting 5% from Elusive Footwork. See how Blackout Kick can be really good, and it hits 2 targets with Shadowboxing Treads? Yeah, you can see how it all forms together now. Blackout Kick critical hits grant an additional stack of Elusive Brawler. So again, we're talking all that dodge, which means Counter-Strike becomes good. Like, all this synergy that's starting to develop. Anvil and Stave. I wouldn't put 2 points in this because there's an internal CD on this as far as I recall. And that internal CD is like, it's way less than what it used to be. I don't think 2 points is ever worth it in this, but 1 point in here just to get that half second off because again, you're dodging a lot. Pretty good. And remember, Exploding Keg causes you to get guaranteed basically Like you take 100% reduced damage, and that includes misses. So this is going to proc a lot of anvil and stave. So a point here has really a lot of value. A second point still has value, but not so much. Facepalm. Basically, Tiger Palm does a bunch load of extra damage and increases your bruise by an additional second. So it goes from 1 second to 2 seconds. I would say this is probably okay in single target situations where you use Tiger Palm a lot, but I don't even think really in most raid situations you're going to be really focused on it. It's a fine talent. You can take it if you really want to, but I don't think it's mandatory. Ox Dance, a new talent. Casting Purifying Brew grants a charge of Ox Dance increased based on your stagger level. When you take damage that is greater than 60% of your current health, the charge is consumed to increase the amount that you stagger. So this basically says, hey, when you cast a Purifying Brew, you're going to gain Ox Dance. When you take a big hit, your stagger is even better. So again, you're seeing that interplay with stagger and why it's so important to track. Very, very good talent. I wasn't convinced until I saw Brewmaster Monks playing with this and just how much work it actually did. It does a lot. So very good. Stormstout / Keg. This is a Shadowlands legendary that I wish was just part of Keg Smash baseline, at least the additional charge part. But I would say this is a mandatory pick. In Mythic Plus, absolutely. In Raid, it's a little bit of a flex pick. I take it because I just like Keg Smash damage. Blackout Combo. Blackout Combo is an interesting talent. There are some Brewmaster Monks that swear by this talent. I think that for beginners and intermediates, you should skip this talent. It forces you to track a lot more, forces you to have to think about what you're doing with your post-blackout kicks, makes your inner clockwork a lot faster. I think you can safely skip it for beginners, and like the value that you gain out of it, not a ton. Weapons of Order we already talked about. Press the Advantage is something that has some niche case uses. Basically, it removes the button of Tiger Palm and makes your main hand auto attacks do stuff naturally. There is a chance that if dual wield builds, because Windwalker can use one-handed agility weapons and two-handed agility weapons, if dual wielding one-handers becomes like the play in the War Within, Press the Advantage may gain some value. I just don't see it. Grab Weapons of Order. Black Ox Adept basically makes it so that Rising Sun Kick also gives you a charge of Ox Dance, so it just increases the uptime. Heightened Guard, making it so that you're at 40% versus 60%. I don't think that's a big deal. Call to Arms basically makes it so that you always get an Ox when you call to Arms. Again, Ox is weak, so you can definitely skip this. And then Chi Surge, basically when you hit Weapons of Order, it does a little bit of burst damage around you. Optional point in Mythic Plus situations, but I don't see a ton of value in it. So I'll go over more depth and builds here, but you can see there's a lot of synergies with Bruise, with Stagger. Blackout Kick gets really heightened. Rising Sun Kick gets a lot of value in this talent tree. Fire damage really gets increased in this tree, and you get a lot of things that interact with your Bruise and your Stagger. So the Brewmaster Monk tree is excellent. It's really, really good. I think for Mythic Plus, like, you can safely choose this build. I'll do links in the description if I can. If not, someone call me out on it and I'll put it in a comment below. But yeah, that's the Monk talent tree. So congratulations, class. We are at our time for today. In Brewmaster 103, we will be talking about rotation and some things to think about tips and tricks wise, and kind of generally speaking, what stats are going to look like for you as you continue to march towards level 80 and our first raid in Mythic Plus season. Until the next video, I hope you all stay safe. Hope you're enjoying yourself. You're having fun. You keep on gaming, and we'll see you in the next video.